Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. This is a weekly news program where we come onto your radio dial and we tell y'all what is really going down from a working class perspective, looking at what's going on here in Kalamazoo, the state of Michigan, the so-called United States, and the rest of the world from a working class perspective. As always, the following thoughts, views, and opinions are not necessarily those of 89.1 WIDR or Western Michigan University, no matter how dope or insightful they may turn out to be. Well, we missed you last week. I know I certainly did. My apologies, and for anybody worried, no, I wasn't kicked off the air about for what is it? Directly quoting Charlie Kirk or anything. I had a medical emergency. I had to run my brother to a medical appointment, so I had to dip out kind of last minute from last week's episode. So sorry about that, but I am here today and we've got a lot to catch up on, of course. Um, I last week didn't really get to talk too much about the Charlie Kirk Memorial and a lot of that other stuff. Of course, many more things have happened since then, and many more important things have kind of, floated underneath the mainstream or the headlines, as it were. So, yeah, as I said, we've got a lot to talk about on today's show, and I wanted to start with something that is certainly under the radar, but very important, especially when it comes to health and dental hygiene of Michiganders, and part and parcel of like the danger of having a lot of like anti-science quacks up at the top. The U.S. government, but this is an article from ProPublica by Anna Clark. It was published on September 19th, talking about the connection between RFK Jr. and how some communities here in Michigan are ditching the use of fluoride, which is an agent that helps, fight tooth decay and, keep your chompers bright and pearly. I'm going to go ahead and read from this article. Um, just 15 months after receiving an award from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention for excellence in community water fluoridation, the city of Grayling, Michigan has changed course. With little notice or fanfare, council members voted unanimously in May to end Grayling's decades-long treatment program. The city shut down the equipment used to deliver the drinking water additive less than 2 weeks later. Although already paid for them, the town returned 6 unopened barrels of the fluoride treatment to the supplier. Personal choice was the issue, said city manager Eric Bajaski. Why are we forcing something on residents and business owners, some of which don't want fluoride in their water, he said. He saw arguments for and against treatment in his research, he said, and figured that those who want fluoride can still get it at the dentist or in their toothpaste. Keep that nugget of information in mind as we continue through this article. Drinking water fluoridation is widely heralded as a public health triumph, but it's had critics since it was pioneered 80 years ago in Grand Rapids, about 150 miles southwest of Grayling. While once largely on the fringes, fluoridation skeptics now hold sway in federal, state, and local governments, and their arguments have seeped into the mainstream. Even in the state where the treatment began, communities are backpedaling. And because customer notice requirements are patchy, people may not even know about it when their fluoridation stops. Robert F. Kennedy Jr., the current Secretary of Health and Human Services, has called fluoride industrial waste and supports an end to community water fluoridation. The head of the Food and Drug Administration said on a newscast that the CDC's online description of water fluoridation as one of the greatest public health achievements is quote unquote misinformation. The CDC, which is in the midst of a leadership exodus and staff revolt, and the EPA are reviewing their respective approaches to fluoride in drinking water. At the same time, President Donald Trump's administration dismantled the CDC's Division of Oral Health, which, among other initiatives, provided research and technical assistance on fluoridation. That's the office to help present rewards for well run programs like the one in Grayling. Since Kennedy was elevated to the nation's top health post, Utah and Florida became the first states to ban communities from adding fluoride to public drinking water. The Utah ban included measures to make prescription fluoride supplements more accessible, but now the FDA is moving to remove certain types of those supplements for children from the market. Another legislation was introduced this year in at least 21 states to prohibit or roll back provisions related to adding fluoride to public water systems, according to Abby Frankel, policy analyst at the National Conference of State Legislatures. In addition, citing Kennedy's Make America Healthy Again initiative, Oklahoma's governor issued an executive order instructing state agencies to cease promotion of fluoridation in their public water supply while it reviews the practice. uh, Going on further in the article, on Michigan's east side, the medical director of St. Clair County's health department urged the agency to take steps to prohibit the addition of fluoride to public water systems. Two Upper Peninsula cities with a shared water system had special council meetings this summer on fluoridation. In Hillsdale, the acting mayor has said that ending fluoridation is a top priority. By the way, Hillsdale, not perhaps incidentally, is also the home of Hillsdale College, which is one of the premier right-wing think tanks in the country. Going down a little bit further, according to Michigan's environmental agency, some communities have temporarily stopped fluoridation or are hesitant to restart because of uncertainty. That prompted it to issue a 5-page statement with the state health departments in March, stressing that the levels recommended for water suppliers, 0.7 milligrams per liter of water, have no adverse health effects and that fluoridation benefits everyone. Local anti-fluoride movements can be vocal and persistent, but do not necessarily represent the viewpoints of the greater community. And I really want to stress something for those who don't follow, a lot of these. Again, there's a lot of dark pathways down like conspiracy YouTube, and there have been a lot of different things contributed to the evils of fluoride through the years. And one thing I really want to stress is it's important to be skeptical of the government, but a lot of times these conspiracy theories function in kind of a distraction, like a red herring. So, and these conspiracy theories can also, again, it kind of shoot ourselves in the face, no pun intended, because what these theories have grown on the internet about like again, despite scientific consensus and evidence that fluoride is somehow like bad for you or it leads to X, Y, or Z. It's been pretty thoroughly proven otherwise. And what it allows for is, again, this idea that skepticism towards the government is inherently a good thing. However, it basically offloads that skepticism down a harmless pipeline, at least harmless to people in power, harmful for your teeth, of course. But that's working class people's teeth. And there is a class dimension to this too, because you've noticed like the kind of the talking point that a lot of the anti-fluoride people have. It's like, well, if you still want fluoride, you can get it in toothpaste or at the dentist. Well, there are a lot of Americans out there who can't afford dental insurance. Even people with with decent health insurance plan have to pay pretty deep copays when they go to the dentist. And for people at the lowest rungs of poverty, it's sometimes difficult to afford toothpaste. So for some people in deep poverty, um, the fluoride in their drinking water might be the only fluoride that they are getting. And I'm kind of saying that to really underscore what I'm going to read in the next part, which really goes into what happens to municipalities when they stop putting fluoride in their water. Going back to the article, communities that end fluoridation will see more decaying teeth, according to Margarita Fontana, professor at the University of Michigan School of Dentistry. Young children, older adults, people with disabilities, and people who are poor are especially at risk, she said, but everyone will be vulnerable. Excessive tooth decay in children can require treatment in hospitals under anesthesia. In rare but extreme cases, it can lead to death. It's unfortunate because we know how to prevent the disease, Fontana said, so it just seems like we're going backwards in time rather than forward. A handful of states require customer notification when fluoridation ends. I'm gonna go a little further down. It talks a little bit about the history of fluoridation, which, as I mentioned, started right here in Southwest Michigan. Began in 1945 in Grand Rapids. Michigan's second largest city, as part of a planned trial intended to last 15 years. Muskegon on the Lake Michigan shore served as the control, meaning its water was not treated with a fluoride additive. And Illinois City, with naturally occurring fluoride in its water, was another point of comparison. 6 years in, Muskegon officials withdrew from the trial after determining that the health benefits were so significant they couldn't deny treatment any longer to Muskegon's children. Similar studies elsewhere continued for years, showing positive outcomes. It was very unusual to have dentures at that very young age at the time, Fontana said. Fluoride treatment was such a fantastic discovery, something so easy that nature already provided. It was already there. It was the greatest discovery, really, for oral health. Grand Rapids celebrates its role in public health history with plaques and a totemic sculpture, but the treatment has been criticized since the early days as variously a communist plot, forced mass medication, and an industrial byproduct that causes more harm than good. Fluoride additives are commonly derived from the processing of phosphate fertilizer. So again, yeah, it's it really tinkers with the conspiracy notes. Anybody who's seen Dr. Strangelove, there's that military character who rants and rambles about fluoride being in drinking water and talking about being a red plot and stuff. Which again it's kind of reactionaries telling on themselves because it is a program for the public good. There's no inherent profit motive in trying to make sure everybody has healthier teeth. You also see this in a lot of like kind of anti-vax circles where it's like, well, people did without vaccines for such and such a number of years. Why do we need fluoride in our drinking water? It's like, well, people before that practice was common had really bad teeth and they got sick and died, and especially children. It's, again, child mortality rates have plummeted in the last 100 years, largely because of things like fluoride in drinking water, vaxes and stuff. Continuing on in the article, um, even as fluoridation became widespread, opposition persisted. Today's critics note that fluoride is now available in toothpaste, as well as in ingestible drops and tablets, like the one for children that the FDA is working to remove from the marketplace. Dental care is also more accessible than it was in the 40s, but as I mentioned earlier, this becomes basically a class issue. The poorest of the poor, who can't afford a dentist, who maybe can't even afford toothpaste, are no longer going to have that access to the fluoride. And so, again, the poorest of the poor are left to have their teeth rot because some slightly wealthier people with too much time on their hands thinks there's nanobots in the fluoride or some other nonsense. Going on, and I really do want to hit on the effects of like what happens when a town lets conspiracy thinking, speak over the common sense of like, or oral health. Um, and the article does a really good job drawing this out. In Grayling, questions about fluoridation were brewing for at least a year before the town changed course. Pajaski, the city manager, said he discussed it off and on with Carlson, the city's water operator. When it came time to reorder the fluoride additive, Pajaski wondered, is it really necessary? Carlson asked the state's environmental agency about the protocol for discontinuing treatment and was told to keep the state posted. In April, Pajaski suggested adding the fluoridation question to the city council's agenda. At the May meeting, the council voted 4-0 to end treatment unanimously. Going on, the article goes on to say there wasn't any outreach to the public or health experts ahead of the vote. Meeting minutes say that Pajaski and Carlson discussed the removal of the fluoride additive after the water operator received additional education and training. From whom? That's a good question. Maybe he's yeah, additional education and training from conspiracy YouTube videos, probably. Both men say that isn't right. Fluoridation was already on the agenda when Carlson attended a training that wasn't about the treatment, but where he had an informal conversation with an instructor that made him worry about fluoride safety. The vote would have occurred even without Kennedy's activism, Pajaski and Pettyjohn said. Carlson, though, noted how Grayling's pivot played out in the context of some of the new narratives coming out of Washington. At the same time, he said locals are more tuned into water issues following the Flint water crisis and the contamination of waterways with PFAS chemicals. This is, again, a really big issue over here. But again, it is, again, conflating, again, some of the issues with industrial capitalism. Again, the Flint water crisis happened because the state government wanted to switch to cheaper water lines. Again, saving money was prioritized over human lives. Same goes for PFAS, which again, industry is valued over the health of our drinking water by letting these companies dump off PFAS chemicals into our drinking water. Conflating fluoride with that is a very good way of, again, providing a distraction for people to, it's like, again, watch the tail, not the dog, or as they say it. And it is also, again, a good way to um, really misconstrue what is really like a public health good with things that in the public discourse are known as like the bad examples of bad chemicals doing bad things to people. But again, that is the result of capitalism. And at the end of the day, the impulse to try to improve everybody's oral health through the introduction of fluoride into the water is not necessarily tied to that same profit. I mean, obviously, you got to pay the fluoride companies money for the water, but if you are thinking in the lens of austerity, then it's probably uh, more to more important to you to cut off that public good and spend that money elsewhere, and usually lining some billionaire's pocket. Anyway, I wanted to go down to, again, an example of what happens when a municipality cuts off the fluoride. In Canada, just across the river from Detroit, the City Council of Windsor, Ontario, voted to stop fluoridation in 2013 after lengthy public debate. Less than 6 years later, the county health agency reported troubling outcomes from oral health screenings at area schools. Found that the percentage of children with decay or requiring urgent care increased 51% in 5 years, while the percentage of children that didn't require any care decreased by 43%. The Windsor Council soon decided to reintroduce water fluoridation, citing as a key prevention strategy. In the province of Alberta, Calgary's council voted in 2011 to stop fluoridation in part because of community skepticism and because expensive repairs to the equipment were needed. But in time, researchers found that local children developed significantly more cavities than their peers in Edmonton, where water is fluoridated. So I just want to leave it with that, and just it's uh, you know the kooky stuff coming from RFK Jr. and the way a lot of these conspiracy theories have been given a platform and uplifted with some veneer of credibility, it really does have an effect on the health of working class people. And it's something that a lot of people typically wouldn't pay attention to. I think the article kind of points this out. People don't, working class people are pretty busy and they don't necessarily have time to keep track of whether the water supply in their town is fluoridated or not. And short of some sort of mass grassroots campaign, um, the squeaky wheel is going to be much louder. The people who are, fluoride skeptics are going to be the ones showing up at these meetings and putting pressure on their local elected officials. And then you end up in a situation where people are deprived of a public health good, really without their knowledge or consent. And like many things with the late stage capitalism that we're currently in, where things seem to be kind of going backwards socially. So you can read that article for yourselves. That is Bridge, Michigan. Amid rise of RFK Jr., some Michigan communities ditch fluoride. All right, we're going to take a quick little break. We got a lot more to talk about. We've got a few more statewide stories when we come back. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Media Cyphers on YouTube, Facebook, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Here at Lock, this is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So this next article, this comes to us from our friends over at the Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, which they hold a very similar function in their community as we try to do here at Media Cyphers, which is kind of again throw a critical lens on uh, you know corporate media, not just at the national level, but like right here in our backyard, and how local news stations respond to what's going on in the community. And I think this article from Jeff Smith is really illustrative of how a lot of times your local news station is more focused on kind of fluff and puff pieces rather than something that actually has political relevance to the communities that they're trying to serve. So this is published on September 28th, written by Jeff Smith. And headline is Local Commercial News Agencies Prioritizes Stories About New Billionaire-Owned Soccer Team Name Over How Immigrant Families Are Being Terrorized by ICE. As Jeff Smith reported recently, Movimiento Cosecha and GR Rapid Response to ICE held a public forum last Saturday to provide opportunity for people to hear the stories of immigrant families who have been affected by the terrorizing actions of ICE in Kent County. As that article noted from Saturday's community forum, a Guatemalan man was arrested by ICE agents just days ago. Excuse me. Just days ago, leaving behind his wife and 5 young children with no source of income. While Grand Rapids' rapid response to ICE has been raising funds and connecting them to resources, these children may never see their father again. This is what family separation looks like. Unfortunately, ICE repression that targets immigrant families doesn't get reported on much. Of the 4 daily commercial news outlets in Grand Rapids, only Wood TV 8 reported on the Cosecha Forum. However, the story was limited in scope and gave more airtime to a Grand Rapids city commissioner than an immigrant and organizer with Cosecha. Comparatively, all 4 daily commercial news outlets in Grand Rapids reported on the name reveal for the new professional soccer team owned jointly by the Billionaire DeVos and Van Andel families. In standard fashion of anything as trivial as the name of a soccer team, MLive ran the headline, New Grand Rapids MLS Next Pro Soccer Team reveals official name, logo, and colors. The 3 Grand Rapids-based TV stations also reported on the name reveal of the professional soccer team co-owned by the DeVos and Van Andel families. The TV coverage of the soccer team name reveal was even more outrageous and relied exclusively on the talking points provided in the media release. Wood TV8's story included footage of the name reveal event that took place at Calder Plaza, while WZZM 13 and WXMI 17 just posted digital renderings of what the Amway soccer stadium will look like. Of course, the billionaire families of DeVos and Van Andel don't need to just rely on the local commercial news agencies. In fact, these families would rather utilize their own media to promote their own interests. GR and Riverfront posted their own story about the name reveal of the professional soccer team co-owned by the DeVos and Van Andel families. One quote in particular stood out, a quote from David Van Andel, chairman, CEO, and co-owner of AC Grand Rapids, who said, AC Grand Rapids isn't just a logo or a jersey. It's a symbol of who we are and what we're building together here in West Michigan. Now, the GR and Riverfront article did not explore the significance of this quote from Van Andel, since it clearly implied that what the billionaire DeVos and Van Andel families have built in West Michigan. One could easily argue that they have built whatever they have wanted to over the decades, often using millions in public dollars at the same time, then keeping all the profits for themselves as they continue to expand the assets they have in Grand Rapids, which includes sports teams, venues, hotels, restaurants, athletic facilities, along with having politicians and a whole range of organizations in their pockets. So, just to kind of make a comparison here in Kalamazoo, I think a lot of you know the big event center that's being built downtown. And especially for some of the younger folks, I'll give you a quick little 101 on that. That was over the course of 15 years, some of the richest people in town were tried various different ways to try to get taxpayers to pay for it. They tried a hotel tax, they tried a direct tax. Every time it came before the people of Kalamazoo, we voted it down. We do not want to use our tax money to build an event center there. And in fact, many people in the community advocated for that space to be used in a different way. Public park, affordable housing, etc. When push finally came to shove, the billionaires so generously dug out of their own pockets to build the event center downtown that most of the people in the community didn't really want. But you know, whose democracy is this anyway? It's American democracy, where everybody has a vote, but not everybody has a few $1 billion. And as it turns out, the people with a few $1 billion have a little bit more of a say. And so, again, a lot of the news coverage, barring some good coverage from the Gazette, thinking uh, Brad, I forget your last name, Brad, but he ran a good piece talking about some of the criticisms of it. But most of the local media here in Kalamazoo have just been talking about like the logistics of the event center and how cool it's going to look and who it's going to employ people and all that other stuff, without talking about any of that background, without talking about the lack of community consensus on having it built. We see this pattern everywhere, almost like basically everywhere in this country, and also our neighbors just to the north up in Grand Rapids. And we certainly have our own billionaires that have an outsized footprint and in their own way kind of utilize local media outlets to normalize what they want and how they want space and space and resources used here in the state of Kalamazoo. And by the way, although I did mention that the billionaire did graciously pull out the money for the event center out of their own pocket, which again they wanted seems like they wanted a pat on the back for that. Congratulations, yay! You bought the thing that you wanted. We should all give you praise for what's going to probably cause tremendous traffic problems in a few years. But anyway, I should emphasize that um, what is happening now is a lot of the infrastructure in and around the event center, especially relates to the Arcadia Creek River, needs to be rebuilt and rerouted and all that stuff, which is going to cost taxpayers here thousands and thousands and maybe almost millions of dollars. So we end up having to pay for this billionaire's boondoggle anyway. And generally, the local news media, with a couple of notable exceptions, is doing nothing but talking about how cool it's going to look when it's finally built. And it's going to host the WMU hockey team and it'll be the home of the K Wings, which, again, I've talked to K Wings fans, and most of them are as mad about the move as the rest of the people in the community. They see no reason why they couldn't have stayed there over at Wing Stadium, which is conveniently right off of I-94 and not in the middle of town, where there is not. Well, 131 is close by, but not quite close enough, and it's going to generate a lot of traffic to the north side. And in fact, if you notice, there is some construction about 131 around 131 to try to change that, which again is going to cost millions and public tax dollars to again try to assuage traffic problems created by an event center that nobody, barring a few billionaires in town, actually wanted. That's kind of again capitalism and process right here in the city of Kalamazoo. And again, the great thing that this article here really points out is that it's not just like CNN, Fox News, MSNBC, all the stuff that kind of like push the normalization of what's the word, capitalist hegemony. It's also again, the news agencies that we have here in our backyard. And it is up to us as the residents of these communities to try to hold them accountable, or, hold the local billionaires accountable when they will not. Anyway, you can read that for yourself. It's the Grand Rapids Institute for Information Democracy, written by Jeff Smith. Local commercial news agencies prioritize stories about new billionaire-owned soccer team name over how immigrant families are being terrorized by ICE. All right, I want to thank y'all for listening. We've got more. I've got to take a quick little break. Got much more after that. Keep it dialogue. You are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast that you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello again, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. Oh, well, we're back. I wanted to talk about there's this great op-ed from Michigan Advance, which also covers the latest coming out of what's going on at the University of Michigan, and they're organizing against the genocide in Gaza. And it's a really critical update, and I think it really underscores some of the currents currently going on here in the state of Michigan, and especially our friends out east. This was published on September 29th. It was written by Layla Kawar and Terry Friedline. Resistance at the University of Michigan was supposedly dead. In fact, it's spreading. At the University of Michigan, 7 more charges were handed down last week against pro-Palestine students and alumni. These latest disciplinary charges represent a decision by the University of Michigan leadership to double down on its strategy of seeking to repress campus pro-Palestine activism. Beginning in November 2023, when former university president Santa Ono called in police from multiple jurisdictions to barricade his office building against students seeking to meet with him, the university has sought to repress students calling for divestment from Israel rather than engaging with them. The strategy of muscle over mediation was on full display in May 2024 during the forceful early morning police clearings of U of M's Gaza Solidarity encampment, when students were sprayed with chemical irritants and their tents were plowed by heavy machinery. In addition to being dragged through university disciplinary proceedings, student activists have been surveilled, banned from entering classroom buildings, followed off campus, and smeared in various all university communications. Most recently, the art exhibit organized by pro-Palestine University of Michigan student activists as part of a week-long Freedom School was kicked off of university grounds by the university's Division of Public Safety and Security. Revealingly, some of those charged in recent months to the University of Michigan's Office of Student Conflict Resolution and the new Office of Student Accountability are members of the Encampment 11. These University of Michigan students and alumni successfully defeated Michigan Attorney General Dana Nessel's political charges in May, but they are now facing disciplinary probation, suspension, and re-enrollment bans for actions that Nessel declined to prosecute. These actions by the University of Michigan leadership not only chill expressions of dissent on campus, but discourage the moral conviction to call out a genocide that is unfolding before the entire world. Yet, even as the university sinks to new lows in its repression of pro-Palestine student activism, resistance is spreading on campus in subtle yet new and important ways. Just last week, on September 19th, University of Michigan's faculty, staff, students, alumni, parents, and community members organized a vigil to honor the lives of Palestinian health workers. Standing across from the university's central campus, vigil participants read the names, ages, and occupations of over 1,200 Palestinian health workers killed during the genocide in Gaza. Those reading names during the 4-hour vigil included a renowned poet and literary journal editor, a children's book author, a senior faculty member in computer science and engineering, and the director of a local arts institution, among others. Sorry, I've got really bad allergies, and I'm trying to get my voice to cooperate. Cooperate. Let's hope that I can get it to work for the rest of the show. Sorry. Yeah. But yeah, you should have heard me a few days ago. I sounded like I was going through puberty all over again. Hopefully you won't hear my Mickey Mouse voice today, but we'll see. This spirit of resistance against institutional efforts to direct public attention away from the genocide in Gaza expanded and gained momentum on the university's Ann Arbor campus over the weekend on September 20th and 21st, when Doctors Against Genocide convened its second annual conference at the University of Michigan Medical School. Throughout the 2 days of conference sessions, several hundred participating doctors and medical students explored strategies for anti genocide awareness raising within medical institutions, discussed their own experiences of practicing medicine under conditions of genocide, and heard the live streamed testimony of doctors providing medical care in Gaza amidst the massive Israeli military assault now underway. Participants and visitors entered the lobby of the Biomedical Sciences Research Building, encountered a massive three-dimensional model that visualized the destruction of all aspects of civilian life in Gaza. And alongside the cartography of genocide stood a wall of posters prepared by medical students that detailed the timeline of attacks on Gaza's shelters, hospitals, universities, schools, cemeteries, archaeological sites, mosques and churches, fields and orchards, greenhouses, water wells, bakeries, and aid distribution sites. A key message of the conference was that the systematic destruction of Gaza's healthcare sector has critical consequences for the population and is itself an instrument of genocide. Medical doctors are generally not known for being overtly political, but Doctors Against Genocide has been on the forefront of raising public awareness about genocides in Palestine, Sudan, Congo, Decay, and elsewhere. For 2 days, University of Michigan's medical campus was invigorated by the presence of physicians wearing white coats with DAG's red logo printed across the back, who had come together to share best practices in medical care and public advocacy for those suffering the catastrophic health consequences of the ongoing genocide in Gaza. Equally significant is the fact that the organizers of the vigil and organizers of the DAG conference worked together to plan their events. Medical faculty and medical students participated in the Friday evening vigil. Likewise, U of M faculty and students from outside the medical school participated in the DAG conference that took place over the days that followed. This intentional effort to bridge the divide between the medical side of the university and the traditional faculties of literature, arts, sciences, as well as other professional schools is important because it builds on the critical vote by the University of Michigan Faculty Senate in May 2023 to unite faculty governance across campuses, including the medical campus, where Michigan Medicine employs a large share of political professors. With the already urgent situation in Gaza worsening and a UN commission confirming that Israel has committed genocide against Palestinians, University of Michigan faculty are coming together in an effort to remind the entire University of Michigan community, including its top-tier hospital and medical school, that we must act with intention and with courage before there are no more Palestinians in Gaza to protect. This is not to suggest that University of Michigan faculty in the past have been silent. Over the past 2 years, University of Michigan faculty and staff have found various ways to criticize the university's heavy-handed efforts to silence pro-Palestine student activists' call for university divestment. For example, the university's proposed disruptive activities policy was widely condemned by faculty in March 2024, who criticized it for targeting student activism and curtailing First Amendment rights. The following semester, more than 1,300 faculty voted in November 2024 to pass a faculty senate motion censuring the University of Michigan regents and calling on them to cease the use of surveillance, policing, physical violence, and legal power as mechanisms to silence speech. Over the past 2 years, the University of Michigan Ann Arbor chapter of the American Association of University Professors, or AAUP, has repeatedly issued statements critical of the university's actions to curtail pro-Palestine student activism on campus. Moreover, as State Attorney General Nessel's office moved forward with prosecuting student activists, faculty, and staff, participated individually in court support. And University of Michigan Faculty and Staff for Justice in Palestine was established with the explicit aim of providing support to pro-Palestine student activists facing repression. Yet at the beginning of this academic year, something different is happening. The jointly organized Vigil and DAG conference indicate a growing awareness among University of Michigan faculty that their role need not be confined to supporting students. Indeed, University of Michigan scholars and clinicians alike are coming to understand that they have their own role to play beyond supporting students. Faculty feel empowered in a new way to channel their own skills and training towards the task of calling out the university's silence, and thus its complicity concerning the ongoing genocide in Gaza. This represents a new approach for faculty in terms of how they understand their roles, both professionally and as citizens, in relation to the genocide in Gaza. It suggests that the sort of faculty led resistance that took place earlier this year in leading opposition to the closure of the university's Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion might be spreading into new areas. In both of these examples, faculty mobilized around their vision of what the university's mission entails, regardless of what central administration asserts it to be. Prayers and a solemn reading of names may not be what people initially think of as resistance. However, at a time when violence and repression seems to be worsening and even the mention of Palestine or genocide draws ire, creating the discursive space on campus to collectively bear witness to the sacrifice of doctors saving Palestinian lives is momentous. In the present moment of unprecedented attacks on higher education, insisting on a set of values for the university community to uphold and then putting these values into practice is at its core an act of resistance. And we need more of this kind of resistance. Again, that was from Layla Kawar and Terry Friedline. It was from Michigan Advance. Resistance at the University of Michigan was supposedly dead. In fact, it's spreading. It was published on September 29th. We will, of course, link to that in our show notes. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us online at Michigan Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Commons podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in radio land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. So this next story it might be one of the most significant news stories of this year that y'all probably haven't heard about. But something we talk about on our show often is the kind of the monopolization of media. Here in our backyard, you have Sinclair owns WWMT, and it owns many stations across the country. It has like kind of an overt kind of conservative political leaning that it kind of bleeds into the coverage of all of the stations it owns with these sort of like right-leaning must runs and all that sort of stuff. And we are looking at something very alarming that may be happening to both again CBS, TikTok, the consolidation of the media by not just capitalists but by the far right. And I'm going to read this story from FAIR, that's Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. By the way, a great resource for us. They really do a lot of a really great job talking about media bias and how corporate consolidation affects the way media kind of reports on itself. But as it turns out, a ardently Zionist right-wing billionaire is on the verge of scooping up both CBS and TikTok, which is going to have some pretty devastating downstream effects on the ability for the average American to get accurate information about what is going on around them. So this is written by Ari Paul, published on September 19th. As Ellison buys out TikTok, U.S. moves towards one-party media. Larry Ellison, founder of the software firm Oracle, is the second richest billionaire in both the U.S. and the world, and for a brief moment was number one. But for a long time, unlike many of his peers, he was unable to boast that he controlled a chunk of the news and opinion reaching the American public. On Forbes' U.S. list, he is sandwiched between Elon Musk, number one, who bought the social media network Twitter and rebranded it as X, and Mark Zuckerberg, who runs Meta, which operates Facebook and Instagram. Jeff Bezos, at number four, has the Washington Post. Larry Page and Sergey Brin of Google, numbers 5 and 6, operate the leading search engine as well as one of the most important news aggregators, Google News. Michael Michael Bloomberg at number 13 has Bloomberg and its various outlets. Ellison seems to have joined the club as TikTok, under U.S. government coercion, is selling 80% of its U.S. operations to an investor consortium that includes Oracle, along with investment firms Silver Lake and Andreessen Horowitz. Ellison is a big Trumper, joining in the reactionary denial of the 2020 presidential elections. Like some of the others in the deal, he is part of the inner circle of Trump's favorite corporate ideologues. This TikTok deal is not just about money, it's about control of the political narrative. But owning a big chunk of the US's leading short form video platform is not Ellison's only claim to being a media mogul. Eyeing the corporate media throne, you can also hear Ellison channeling Seinfeld's Frank Costanza, confronted with the daunting prospect of competing in computer sales against IBM and Microsoft, declaring, "I've got a secret weapon, my son." Enter Larry's son, David Ellison, who was born into the kind of riches most can barely dream of. The younger Ellison is the CEO of Skydance, which recently merged with Paramount, giving him control over CBS. David's campaign contributions trend to be more to the Democratic establishment, but it's his father's politics that seem to be reshaping the newly bought network. Anti-woke zealot Barry Weiss is nearing a top role at CBS News, which left-leaning staffers at the network fret could amount to dropping a grenade in the newsroom. It added that the network is weighing naming Weiss editor-in-chief or co-president of the network, and that Ellison is looking to buy her news site, the Free Press, in a deal valued upwards of $100 million. According to Reuters, it was David Ellison who installed Kenneth Weinstein, a supporter of President Donald Trump and the former CEO of conservative think tank Hudson Institute, as ombudsman of CBS News. The New York Post reports that the Ellison father and son team are now looking to buy Warner Brothers Discovery, which carries with it CNN, creating an unprecedented level of media consolidation. While the Post said such a purchase could be difficult because Warner Brothers has a market cap of around $38 billion, that might not matter, as Larry Ellison's net worth leaped by $100 billion following Oracle's latest blowout earnings report. He is closing in on being the richest dude in the world with a net worth of more than $370 billion. CNN reports 1.8 million viewers, and CBS reports an average total audience of 1.4 million, for a combined 3.2 million, which eclipses ABC, NBC, and MSNBC. The CNN CBS combo could reach far more Americans through online news, with CNN.com's 276 million visitors per month already making it the nation's second biggest news site. Add CBSNews.com's 63 million visits, and you'll have an entity that edges closer to the heretofore undisputed leader, the New York Times, with its 425 million visits per month. Former CBS Evening News star Dan Rather said Americans have to be concerned about the consolidation of huge billionaires getting control of nearly all of the major news outlets, Rather added. Pretty hard to be optimistic about the possibilities of the Ellisons buying CNN. Fast Company summarized the dangerous nature of the deal this way. If the Warner Brothers Discovery deal were to go through, Ellison would control streaming services with a combined 200 million plus subscribers, says Barclays, though there will be overlap between the Paramount Plus, HBO Max, and Pluto services. It's something Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren warned against on Twitter on September 11th. The deal with Warner Brothers Discovery, she wrote, must be blocked as a dangerous concentration of power. Add TikTok's 170 million plus users and one of the hottest properties in the social space, and you get to a position of dominance in the media. It is not a sign of a healthy democracy when billionaires are buying up all the means of cultural consumption, says Stephen Buckley, lecturer in media and digital sociology at City St. George's, University of London. Others have pointed out that the potential playbook, if this were to go ahead, draws comparisons with Elon Musk's takeover of a social platform to dominate public discourse. Musk had previously taken credit for helping Trump secure the White House in 2024 through his positioning of X as a supportive social network. It is naive to think that over time, Ellison's business and political philosophy, combined with the external political pressures from the future administrations, wouldn't have an impact on the American public experience of TikTok, Buckley says. And I do want to make a quick aside. The Ellisons are also, very pro-Zionist, and so is Weiss. And One of the things that were coming out last year with both the American government and the Israeli government saying out there was calling it the TikTok problem. It was the problem that young Americans across the country were seeing videos straight from Gaza on TikTok of Palestinians telling their own stories about the genocide that was unfolding. They want to close Pandora's box and they want to put a lock on it and seal it and make sure that young Americans are never see that kind of stuff ever again. Because when they control the algorithm, they will control the narrative and what gets kind of broadcast to us through those social media platforms. The whole attempt during the Biden administration to, forcing TikTok to sell it to some American-owned business, all led to this, where again, one of the biggest social media platforms in the world here in America is going to be controlled by again these far right pro genocide forces. Back to the article. The United States has seen a tremendous amount of conservative media capture since Donald Trump returned to the White House. Bezos has moved to call viewpoints of the Washington Post that might offend Trump. Zuckerberg has taken steps to make Facebook friendlier to MAGA, and Musk has turned Twitter into a vehicle for his far-right politics. All three men sat together at Trump's inauguration. The Los Angeles Times, under billionaire owner Patrick Soon-Shiong, has also made strenuous efforts to be more Trump-friendly. Both Ellisons, the Hollywood Reporter said, have shown support for Trump in the past, and they certainly buck the rising outrage against Israel's genocide in Gaza. Paramount, under its new owner, David Ellison, has become the first major Hollywood studio to condemn a boycott of Israeli film institutions that more than 4,000 actors and directors now support, said the New York Times. With the Trump regime shutting down the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which funds NPR and PBS, the space for semi-skeptical media is shrinking as the space for regime-friendly broadcasters is growing. As for social media, given that Andreessen Horowitz's co-founders are also Trump supporters, it seems that along with Ellison, these oligarchs could steer TikTok in the same direction as Facebook and Twitter. Worse, critics of TikTok's Chinese ownership fretted that data collection of American users eventually led to surveillance by the Chinese government. Data collection is a given with social media generally, but now that power rests partly with Ellison, who has gotten rich off of such technology. Fortune magazine wrote, Oracle founder Larry Ellison sees a growing opportunity for his company to help authorities analyze real-time data from millions of surveillance cameras. And funnily enough, an AP investigation showed that Oracle was among the many Silicon Valley firms whose technologies have supported Chinese surveillance systems. Just imagine what he could do with a large social media network like TikTok. Dan Rather and others are right that the Ellison duo taking over both CBS and CNN, as well as controlling a major social media network like TikTok, would be dangerous for democracy. And given their closeness to the Trump regime, that seems to be the point. Again, you can read that for yourself. That was written by Ari Paul, published on FAIR, or Fairness and Accuracy in Reporting. As Ellison buys out TikTok, U.S. moves towards one-party media. Which again, I really want to emphasize the importance of independent media in these times, because these mainstream outlets are going to just be kowtowing more and more to the state. That includes TikTok. So I encourage people, some of the independent sources that we draw from, you should look up yourselves if you get a chance. Democracy Now! Is probably the gold standard in progressive journalism here in the country. Also want to recommend The Nation magazine, which has been around for over 150 years. In these times, out of Chicago, which focuses on labor reporting. And then there are a lot of totally free online outlets that give you give you the real news without the capitalist spin. Thinking of truthout.com, or is it truthout.org? Truthout.org, sorry, truthout.org. The Intercept, Drop Site News, which does really important foreign policy journalism. Jacobin, Left Voice, which is very explicitly a socialist news publication. World Socialist website, while having some of its problems, does do some really great reporting. And then Jacobin, which does some fantastic socialist analysis of the important news stories of the day. Of course, there's also us, Media Cyphers. So please, as the media landscape just keeps getting further monopolized by the far right, I encourage people, um, look to the independent media that I just listed off. Tell your friends about it. Importantly, tell your family, because while I do give the American working class a lot more credit than most of our politicians do, um, it can be hard to go against the grain when like every media outlet in the country is beating the same drum. So again, we will link to that article in our show notes. We're going to take another quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You'd also find us online, Media Cyphers on Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast you can find on most podcasting apps. Keep it on locked. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I've got two more articles I'm going to be talking about. I'm kind of close up things early, maybe kind of try to save my voice a little bit. But there's other things I really wanted to address. And one was and we didn't really talk about this too much 2 weeks ago because, especially, but I think it's worth hitting on now. The designation of Antifa as a terrorist organization. And obviously, let's just talk a little bit about the absurdity of it. And there's an article from the Intercept that's um, I think is kind of a good take on it. But obviously, the idea of making Antifa a terrorist organization is pretty ridiculous because Antifa is an idea. It's literally an abbreviation of anti-fascist, which I think universally everybody should probably be anti-fascist. I mean, if you're pro-fa, I think I'm kind of suspicious of you a little bit. Um, but even more so, it basically tries to criminalize a type of activism that is at its core adversarial to power. And of course, again, is not a lot of what they've been trying to do lately, from, again, all of the, you know, uh, trying to blame the far left for violence. I don't know if I mentioned this 2 weeks ago on the show, but again, you can look at studies from right-wing think tanks like the Cato Institute that shows that like right-wing political violence far outstrips incidents of left-wing political violence. I talked a little bit 2 weeks ago on why that is, but I really want to kind of drill down on this idea of yes, it seems kind of absurd on the face to classify like anti-fascism as a terrorist organization, especially since even people who do dress up in the black bloc stuff and go crazy. It's like it's not like an organized it's entity. There's been a lot of jokes flinging around Twitter and stuff. Just like, do they think there's just like an Antifa Incorporated? We all just like, payroll. There's payroll, sponsored by George Soros and all that stuff. And to some certain extent, there are people on the right who do believe that. It's basic projection. That is how all of like their right-wing institutions are based on. So there must be some parallel one on the left that's funding anti-fascism. When like anti-fascism is basically funded by basement shows and art sales and that kind of thing. Um so again, the idea that Antifa is a terrorist organization is absurd, but it serves a purpose for the administration, which it's such a vague definition that essentially anybody who is in opposition to the current state could potentially be designated Antifa, and that's where the danger really relies. I want to read from this article from The Intercept, published on September 19th by Natasha Leonard. Trump's idea of the criminal left is a fiction, a coordinated defense against his against his fascism shouldn't be. The president describes a cartoonish fantasy of a George Soros backed criminal network. If only the left were that good at collective resistance. Multi billionaire investor George Soros is not funding a network of militant left wing activists. That fact has not stopped President Donald Trump from spending the days since Charlie Kirk's killing calling, oh, excuse me, calling to press charges against the liberal philanthropists under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations, or RICO Act, for allegedly bankrolling violent leftist protests across the country. This absurd idea is among an array of repressive proposals, ranging from the illegal to the unconstitutional, that Trump and his acolytes have pulled from a cartoonishly blatant playbook of fascist scapegoating, conspiracies of Jewish dark money and all. The Trump administration will likely fail to bring successful prosecutions against the disparate liberal and leftist individuals and organizations they see as a well funded criminal network. But we are long past the point of pretending the administration will be bound by law or tethered to factual reality when it comes to achieving its broader authoritarian goals. Trump announced on Wednesday night, for example, that he was designating Antifa a major terrorist organization. The proclamation posted on Truth Social is senseless in a number of ways. Firstly, as has been stated ad nauseum, there's no such organization as Antifa, an abbreviation of anti-fascist, which is a set of practices and militant tactics deployed by activists for nearly a century. There are groups who come together under the Antifa banner, but there is zero centralized leadership or membership structure. Secondly, the U.S. has no statutes under which groups are designated domestic terror organizations. Some might recall Trump's very similar announcement during the 2020 George Floyd uprisings, when he took pains to target left wing activists and discredit the Black Led movement. At the time, his tweet did not call into being a non existent domestic terror statute against a non existent organization. It should not be overlooked that since Trump's first term, all significant efforts to collectively prosecute social justice movements have failed. On Trump's 2017 inauguration day, over 200 anti fascist J20 protesters were mass arrested and hit with hefty felony riot charges based on no more than presence at the protest. Charges were later dismissed or dropped in mass. Just, just last week, a judge in Fulton County, Georgia, announced that he was dismissing overreaching RICO charges against 61 participants in the Atlanta-based Stop Cop City movement. The prosecutor's 2-year effort to frame the protest movement as a criminal conspiracy collapsed. Having reported directly on both the J20 and Stop Cop City cases, I saw firsthand the toll a lengthy prosecutorial process can take on defendants, their supporters, and the entire targeted movement. Prosecutions need not lead to convictions to ruin lives and decimate social movement capacities. Federal investigations do not need to have factual basis for their targets to be harassed and intimidated. First Amendment protected speech can still get you fired. Fear spreads, cowardice abounds, and the real risk of state and state-sanctioned persecution hangs over targeted communities. The Atlanta RICO case may have been, as political scientist Joseph Brown told The Guardian, probably the highest profile failure of using conspiracy charges to indict a protest movement. But even malicious prosecutions drain movement resources, both material and emotional, while directly keeping defendants from movement work. What these cases nonetheless make clear is that collective persecution must be met with collective defense. None of the J20 or Atlanta defendants collaborated with prosecutors or took deals that entailed throwing other movement participants under the bus. Without compliant targets, the meritless cases fall apart. We are today in a very different moment than in Trump's first term, when the president first attempted to frame Antifa as a catch-all boogeyman. Trump's lawless speech acts are now taken as marching orders by his loyalists in government, law enforcement, and the judiciary. We've seen the readiness with which institutions will sacrifice their employees and affiliates to appease the president. For failing to sufficiently toe the regime line on canonizing Kirk, ABC temporarily pulled comedian Jim Kimmel from the air, and Washington Post fired columnist Karen Attia. Uh, Dozens of workers, including teachers, airline workers, professors, and post office employees, have been fired or placed on leave for online comments deemed wrong speak about Kirk or his murder. Meanwhile, university administrations nationwide, from Columbia to the University of California, continue to model genuflection and complicity in firing, censuring, and expelling scholars and students for protesting Israel's genocide. Trump and his followers' paranoid projections about a Soros funded radical left fostered in the Marxist laboratories of U.S. higher education and represented by the Democratic Party are laughably delusional. The tragedy, though, is that while Trump's chaotic and maximalist crackdown strategy aims to target centrist liberals alongside leftist activists as an imagined whole, there's little promise that establishment liberal figures and organizations will act with the integrity and solidarity it takes to rebuff such attacks. To neglect to do so would be a grave mistake, morally and strategically, when clear lessons of collective defense are there to be learned. Trump's conspiracy about a networked, well funded greater left is a fiction. A united front against fascism shouldn't be. Anyway, that was from The Intercept, written by Natasha Leonard. We're going to take another quick little break. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. You can also find us on Facebook, YouTube, or the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. You can find on most podcasting apps. Keep your dial locked. This is Media Cyphers, your source for political revolution. Hello, everybody out there in Radio Land. Y'all are listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR or online at widerfm.org. I want to tell you an international story that is really significant and really has not been talked about a lot in the mainstream press for, well, some pretty important reasons. But Italy, among several other countries, have sent Navy ships to protect the global Samud flotilla after it was attacked by Israeli drones. And if you know anything about Italian politics or global politics, you might be asking, like, isn't Italy run by like a right winger who is like probably called themselves a fascist? The answer is yes, it is. And you might be wondering even further, why would the Italian government then send a ship to defend the flotilla? Well, the Italian labor movement has been doing something very interesting in the past couple of weeks, and I want to talk about it right now. Italian unions say they are ready to strike after attacks in Gaza flotilla. It's published from Left Voice, written by James Dennis Hoff on September 24th. On Tuesday, Israel once again attacked the global Samud flotilla. The ships, now just 6 days away from the coast of Gaza, now much closer, as we are broadcasting today, are attempting to deliver humanitarian aid and break the illegal and genocidal blockade by Israel. These attacks, the third since the flotilla set sail, were the largest and most violent yet, and seem to have included several drones equipped with flashbang grenades. All in all, at least 10 vessels were attacked by drones in the middle of the night as passengers were sleeping. The latest escalation shows that Israel is prepared to use violence and intimidation to stop the humanitarian mission, just as it has murdered Palestinians while it claims to be providing aid. This attack must be condemned as the war crime that it is, and people across the world, particularly in the imperialist core, must rise up to demand an end to the genocide, the blockade, and all financial and military support for the apartheid state of Israel. And on this front, the working people of Italy have been especially militant. When the flotilla set sail last August, Italian dock workers promised that they would block all of Europe if the ships were attacked. In response to yesterday's bombing, Italy's General Confederation of Labor, the largest trade union in Italy, affirmed this sentiment and expressed its commitment to join dock workers in strike actions. In a statement published on Wednesday, the CGIL said that it condemns the latest and most serious attacks tonight against the global Somali flotilla en route to deliver humanitarian aid to Gaza, where unacceptable crimes against the civilian population continue, and that it is ready to call a general strike as quickly as necessary in the event of further attacks, blockades, or seizures of vessels or materials. In addition to this, The CGIL said it would join demonstrations on Wednesday in Montecitorio in the center of Rome, where thousands are expected to turn out to condemn Israel's crimes. This declaration comes just 2 days after a much smaller rank and file union called its own 24-hour general strike, which turned out hundreds of thousands of people across Italy from Milan to Naples. Such actions show the determination of the working people of Italy and Europe to confront genocide, actions that so far seem to be having an impact on Italian diplomacy with the state of Israel. In fact, in the wake of the attacks, the Italian government announced that it was sending at least one naval vessel to protect the flotilla, an unprecedented move that could bring the Italian military face to face with the IDF in international waters. However, excuse me, so I'll stop it right there, but I really want to point out this this article and this geopolitical event really gives credence to something that I talk about a lot on the show, which is to say the power of the worker, the power of the strike, the power of us to force these capitalists to accede to our demands. It is there. It is on the table. It is waiting for us to pick it up. And the Italian workers proved it again under a government very similar to that of Donald Trump. They forced their military to go out and protect an aid flotilla against the IDF. If we had that same kind of solidarity, that same kind of militancy here in this country, I do not doubt that we could make the Trump administration do the very same thing. These capitalists only know one thing, they only understand one thing, and that is when you put your hands in your pockets and you take money away from them. And when you do that, we would have these capitalists do what we want as the working class. And granted, the U.S. government has a much more tangled relationship with the state of Israel, but I think it is worth saying that while the global the world has really turned against Israel and what they've done against the people of Gaza, I think we could have prevented this a lot sooner if we had the same kind of solidarity and militancy that the Italian working class has exhibited um, in the face of the genocide in Gaza. I salute those Italian workers, and I hope in the deepest pits of my heart that us workers here in the Imperial Corps can eventually rise to the occasion and exercise that same kind of muscle against our own fascist government. Speaking of fascist governments, I want to close today's show by talking a little bit about Assata Shakur, who just passed away last week. Um, and if you don't know much about her, I would recommend was a vital again left wing activist with the Black Panther Party back in the 60s and 70s. She had to flee the country after what she claimed was trumped up murder charges. I'll talk about that more in a minute. Funnily enough, the current FBI director decided Kash Patel decided he had to chime in and chastise people for memorializing Assata Shakur. Like, how dare you memorialize somebody's like anti-American murderer, blah blah blah. Which again, Assata Shakur maintained her innocence until she died. And again, like that's pretty rich coming from people who wanted us all to, who decided we need to do a national holiday for a white supremacist dork like Charlie Kirk. So let me just say that it is sad to see one of the big figures of kind of that radical moment in U.S. history pass on. But it's also a victory because she got to live out the rest of her life in her own terms. Thanks to the people of Cuba who took her in and protected her from prosecution from the U.S. government. And the U.S. government tried to exert a lot of pressure on Cuba to get her back. Like they offered carrots and sticks just to get this one kind of fugitive from the U.S. justice system back into the U.S. shores. And I could read a lot of quotes from Assata Shakur. I really recommend folks check out her autobiography, but um, to connect it to a lot of the themes that are persistent in our show, Media Cyphers, I want to read from Assata Shakur's open letter to the media that was published in 1998, originally in the Amsterdam News, which is again a black newspaper out of New York. Excuse me. I'm not going to read the whole thing, but I do recommend folks check it out. You can read it for yourselves. Um, but this is Assata Shakur in their own words. My name is Assata Shakur, and I am a 20th century escaped slave. Because of government persecution, I was left with no other choice than to flee from the political repression, racism, and violence that dominate the U.S. government's policy toward people of color. I am an ex political prisoner, and I've been living in exile in Cuba since 1984. I've been a political activist most of my life, and although the US government has done everything in its power to criminalize me, I am not a criminal, nor have I ever been one. In the 1960s, I participated in various struggles. The excuse me. Uh, the Black Liberation Movement, the Student Rights Movement, and the movement to end the war in Vietnam. I joined the Black Panther Party. By 1969, the Black Panther Party had become the #1 organization targeted by the FBI's COINTELPRO program. Because the Black Panther Party demanded the total liberation of Black people, J. Edgar Hoover called it the greatest threat to the internal security of the country and vowed to destroy it and its leaders and activists. And for a little bit of context for our younger listeners, COINTELPRO was a was a program by the FBI to target left-wing organizations internally and externally to try to crush them, make them dissolve. Again, the relevancy, kind of thing that Kash Patel would do if him and his current FBI were anywhere near competent. COINTELPRO was also like heavily involved in the assassination of other Black liberation figures like Fred Hampton. Um, again, definitely worth digging into, and just the idea that like yes, the government has directly targeted left wing and social movements in the past, and there's a well documented history of them doing exactly that. And again, there is you can make a direct connection from the persecution of Assata Shakur to the FBI of today, which is clumsily trying to scrawl messages on shell casings, anti-ice. Yeah, so that looks credible. Anyway, going back to Assata Shakur. In 1978, my case was one of the many brought before the United Nations organization in a petition filed by the National Conference of Black Lawyers, the National Alliance Against Racist and Political Repression, and the United Church of Christ Commission for Racial Justice, exposing the existence of political prisoners in the United States, their political persecution, and the cruel and inhuman treatment they received in U.S. prisons. According to the report, the FBI and the New York Police Department in particular charged and accused Assata Shakur of participating in attacks on law enforcement personnel and widely circulated such charges and accusations among police agencies and units. The FBI and the NYPD further charged her as being a leader of the Black Liberation Army, which the government and its respective agencies described as an organization engaged in the shooting of police officers. This description of the Black Liberation Army and the accusation of Assata Shakur's relationship to it was widely circulated by government agents among police agencies and units. As a result of these activities by the government, Ms. Shakur became a hunted person. Posters in police precincts and banks described her as being involved in serious criminal activities. She was highlighted on the FBI's most wanted list and to police at all levels. She became a shoot to kill target. I was falsely accused in 6 different criminal cases, and in all 6 of these cases, I was eventually acquitted or the charges were dismissed. The fact that I was acquitted or that the charges were dismissed did not mean that I received justice in the courts. That was certainly not the case. It only meant that the evidence presented against me was so flimsy and false that my innocence became evident. The political persecution was part and parcel of the government's policy of eliminating political opponents by charging them with crimes and arresting them with no regard for the factual basis of such charges. She goes on to talk about the incident on May 2nd, 1973, where the government claims that she fired on a police officer. Oh, um, and she goes on to explain that she, in fact, did not, and that she had their hands in the air. Um, and, again, it's kind of a he said, she said thing. You can either believe Assata Shakur, who was a principled leftist revolutionary, or the federal government that was documented at the time going after left activists with false charges and all that sort of thing. So, yeah. Another similar case worth looking up, the Mumia Abdul Jamal, who is still currently in prison for a crime that many believe he did not actually commit. It goes on to talk about her letter to the Pope, because apparently the New Jersey State Police had written a letter to the Pope asking him to intervene on their behalf to extradite her back to the U.S. She wrote a letter to the Pope herself, saying, pointing out the kind of just how incredulous, or not incredulous, but uh, um, again, the the circumstances of the case, and just again how amoral it was to ask the Pope to bring try to extradite her back to the United States. But the important thing in the next part of this letter that I really wanted to spend some time uh, on was her talking about her interaction with the mainstream corporate media in 1998. In January of 1998, during the Pope's visit to Cuba, I agreed to do an interview with NBC journalist Ralph Penza around my letter to the Pope about my experiences in the New Jersey court system, about the charges I saw in the United States, and its treatment of Black people in the past 25 years. I agreed to do this interview because I saw this secret letter to the Pope as a vicious, vulgar publicity maneuver on the part of the New Jersey State Police and as a cynical attempt to manipulate the Pope. I lived in Cuba for many years and was completely out of touch with the sensationalist, dishonest nature of the established media today. It is worse today than it was 30 years ago, and it's probably even worse. Well, it has gotten even worse since 1998. After years of being victimized by the establishment media, it was naive of me to hope that I might finally get the opportunity to tell my side of the story. Instead of an interview with me, what took place was a staged media event in three parts, full of distortions, inaccuracies, and outright lies. NBC purposely misrepresented the facts. Not only did NBC spend thousands of dollars promoting this exclusive interview series on NBC, they also spent a great deal of money advertising this exclusive interview on Black radio stations and also placed notices in local newspapers. Like most poor and oppressed people in the United States, I do not have a voice. Black people and poor people in the US have no real freedom of speech, no real freedom of expression, and very little freedom of the press. The Black press and the progressive media has historically played an essential role in the struggle for social justice. We need to continue and to expand that tradition. We need to create media outlets that help educate our people and our children and not annihilate their minds. I am only one woman. I own no TV stations, radio stations, or newspapers, but I feel that people need to be educated as to what is going on and to understand the connection between the news media and the instruments of repression in America. All I have is my voice, my spirit, and the will to tell the truth. But I sincerely ask those of you in the Black media, those of you in the progressive media, those of you who believe in true freedom, to publish this statement and let people know what is happening. We have no voice, so you must be the voice of the voiceless. Free all political prisoners. I send you love and revolutionary greetings from Cuba, one of the largest, most resistant, and most courageous palanquins or maroon camps that has ever existed on the face of this planet. It was Assata Shakur, in her own words, passed away last week in Cuba, free and never brought to heel by the American government. Thank you all for listening. You have been listening to Media Cyphers only on 89.1 WIDR. Again, you can find us online, Facebook, YouTube, and the Media Cyphers Kalamazoo podcast. Thanks again for listening. And until next time, everybody, keep on fighting for that revolution solution.